Whilst I'm waiting for the rod to go round, welcome to episode 14 of Shipp's Tips. On this episode, what timing that is. I've brought you to a fantastic fishery. It's absolutely ideal for method feeder fishing. It's called Manor Farm Leisure, just on the outskirts of Evesham. Let me just concentrate a little bit. And this episode, which I know we've covered slightly before, is all about commercial feeder fishing. So basically method feeders, pellet feeders, you know, how to fish with them. But most importantly, and I know it makes a huge difference, is what baits we're going to be putting on those feeders. And that's hook baits, you know, what size pellets, how to get the pellets and the ground bait right. So let's just get this one in. And the first thing I'm going to start off with is showing you all the baits. Because a lot of people get confused, you know, you've got ground bait, you've got different size pellets. Why do you use that? So that's what this episode is all going to be about, to take the confusion away and to keep it as simple as possible. And believe me, method feeder fishing, you know, not just method feeder fishing, but commercial feeder fishing is not hard. It's just getting the actual things right. So let's get this one out. Feels like a big F1. There's some massive F1s in this lake. I think I'm on Island Lake. So I'm chugging to an island. It's fantastic fishing. Feels like a nice fish. I've changed things around already since I've started. And the difference in your catch rate is massive. And that's what this episode is all about. The beautiful Manor Farm F1. That's actually sort of the average stamp. I mean, they are in here, they're huge and they are proper crafty. But what a great fish to open this episode 14 of Shipp's Tips. Let's get him back. Right, let's get down to the nitty gritty, and I think probably the most important part of method feeder fishing. The setup itself, it doesn't get easier, and obviously I'll show you that in a little bit. But let's get down to, I think, you know, from doing lots of method feeder fishing over many years, I know what you do here on your side tray catches you more fish. So let's start off with the sort of raw ingredients, if you like. Now, obviously at Manor Farm Leisure, you're allowed to use ground bait, and we all know ground bait on its day is unbeatable. Now, you'll probably see I'm sat here in a hoodie today. It's been a cold morning. You know, it's probably not far off now from getting its first frosts, but this would be no different whether I was fishing the height of summer or winter. Ground bait is a must. You have to bring it. You don't have to bring loads. It's not like pole fishing, but feeder fishing, you know, you can literally have 2 to 3 pints with you and that's enough. But in there, I've got my favorite ground bait of all time is match method mix. We've spoke about it lots of times, but driving here this morning, bright day, no wind, it's going to be a little bit more trickier, and obviously cold mornings. But I've actually put 2 pints of match method mix in there, and also 1 pint of Pro Thatcher's green. And as you can see from that, it's just toned everything down. So match method mix is quite a light coloured ground bait, but that green Thatcher's just tones it down a little bit. And there is some massive F1s in here. There are some massive F1s. Whether we're going to catch them today, I don't know, but they're really clever, and I just think that's going to give me the biggest chance today. But basically, rule of thumb, if you mix 3 pints of that's a 2 pint container. So if you mix 3 pints of dry ground bait to 1 pint of water, so that's whether you're fishing with Pro Thatchers or match method mix, if you mix 3 dry to 1 pint of water, that brings it out. You'll have to leave it for 20 minutes, obviously push it through a riddle, and it comes out quite crumbly like that. You could actually get that on a method, but it'd be quite dry, and if you keep it dry like that, it makes everything bind really well. But that is not what I'm going to put on the feeder. I've basically got my little raw ingredients here, and then I've got my little two pint bowl, which then I adjust with water. And I also, another little trick is bait booster, and obviously we'll talk about that as we're going, because it's really, really important. And I do exactly the same with my 2mm pellets, and that's a mixture of Pro Feed 2mm, and they're really, really oily. We spoke about it before. They go through a process at the factory, and I've got just normal thin perfect 2mm, and I can mix them 50-50. I think they're great. You've got two different colors. I can make them bind, I can make them quite crumbly, but again, if I tried to get them around a method at the moment, it just wouldn't happen. I got to like wet them off. And speaking to a lot of guys probably like you that are watching this, they're like, oh, I just normally chuck all my stuff in a container, and then I get like it's all too wet, or too, you know, mostly too wet, and that's why I do what I do. And obviously we'll talk about that in depth as we're going along. So that's my 2 ingredients today. So I've got my ground bait and my 2mm, but I've also got 1mm. It's brand new, they've just come out. Believe me, you know, venues where you can't use ground bait and you've got to use pellets, they're going to be massive. And in there at the moment, I actually started the session today with just 2mm, but I've introduced 1mm, and obviously I'm out filming with Jake who works for Sonubaits, and we caught a couple of fish. I did actually lose a carp and a snag, but as soon as I started putting 1mm round, it was just ridiculous. Within 10 minutes, my tip's knocking, I've started to catch. Obviously, I've adjusted a few things that we'll talk about, but honestly, do what I do there, have a few containers with your dryish ingredients in, and then you can just adjust it as you go along. Right, and moving on to hook baits. Again, mega important, as we all know, whether you're fishing for carp, bream, or F1s. And I do try and keep it quite simple. And then obviously bandoms in different sizes, different colors. We all know that. I've just got some 6mm bandom wafters. I do like wafters. I don't, you know, since they've been like sort of designed for carp fishing, I just think they make perfect sense, to be honest. And I obviously carry a variation, but a little tub like that with different colors in, it covers most of your sort of feeder fishing. And then I always carry a little selection of, I've got some Robin Reds in there, and then some normal 6mm thin perfect pellets, just literally a handful of each in there. Some venues you go to, hard pellet is really, really good, but I do like the bandoms. And never forget about the old faithful maggots. You know, if things change today, it might start off really well, then it sort of goes off a little bit. It's very similar to what happens on the pole. If you're pole fishing, sometimes you've got to adjust what you do during the day. So I've got some dead reds, normally I've got some whites in there, but normally single or double dead red. When it goes off, or you can't actually catch the fish in your peg, never forget your red maggots. So there's the hook baits and all the baits that we're going to be using around a feeder. What I'm going to do, I think, for you guys is actually start fishing again, and then I'll run you through the setup as I'm fishing. So let's get out there and catch a few fish. Just before we start fishing again, let's go through the setup. And it is really, really simple, especially today with the ICS interchangeable system. So let's go through the rod first. It's actually sort of 35, probably 40 meters wide rod fishing, so it's a nice little chuck. I'm using one of my favorite rods. It's called a Superior, 10 foot. It's a casting weight of 30 grams. So it's gonna get me out there nice and easy. If you start using sort of 9 foot rods, sometimes a great big carp just top there. I can't wait to get back out, to be honest. You might struggle, but with a 10 foot Superior today, it's going to be absolutely ideal. 8 pound sinking feeder mono. Again, a real tough line. When you're casting in and out, you know, up to them islands especially, there's going to be stones, there's going to be pebbles and that on the bottom. You need something which is going to be able to put up with that, especially when you're in and out all day catching plenty of fish. Let's get down to the feeder itself. I'm actually using at the moment an Ics Method Feeder. This is the inline version. So obviously it goes up and down your main line. If anything snaps, it's a safe rig. Obviously you can, if you wanted to on this venue, use elasticated, and I'll talk about that in a second. But weights of feeders again. For the distance I'm fishing there, with these conditions, I need like a 30 gram feeder. That's going to get me out there. It's going to hold bottom, even with a bit of a wind on it. You know, if you get a bit of a bow in your line, you don't want your feeder being dragged along the bottom. So 30 grams is my preferred weight. If I'm fishing for lots of F1s on a shorter chuck, try and get down to 20 grams. You know, we all know some of the venues nowadays have got little Crashio in, and believe you me, the lighter feeders definitely stop hook pulls. I've got an easy, quick change bead on there. for your hook length, and that is just tied in a simple loop, which I find the best way. And obviously the stem of the quick change system comes down over top of the loop like that, so it's all protected, and it's, you know, you can't see anything at all. Hook wise is easy. I've got a 16 KKMB again, which is my preferred hook because there's lots of F1s in this lake, and I think a finer hook definitely helps to get the fish out. Obviously, if I start hooking loads of carp, I've got the option to step up to a KKH, which is basically the same hook but a lot stronger. 4-inch hook length of 017 power line, ready to go. Little band on there so I can put pellets, bandams. I've been fishing with bandams at the moment, which are really, really good. A pink bandam. So that's the interchange system, obviously free running. Let's just put that in there, and I'll show you the elasticated setup, because obviously if I'm fishing at distance, you know, places like Boddingtons, places where I'm chucking out for bream and it's a long distance, elasticated feeders definitely come into their self. You know, you can chuck it out, basically it's like a bolt rig. So if the fish picks up your hook bait, it's got to drag the feeder straight away. So it's not free running, but obviously check with your rules. And a lot of people just love elasticated stems. I do use them now and again, but my preferred sort of setup is the free running. Nice and easy. Snap, American snap swivel on there, again tied in a loop, so obviously you can take that off just like that, and you can do several stems with different, you know, different hook lengths on. So that's the options of elasticated and free running. Let's get that out of the way a sec. And then obviously different feeders, you know, different sizes. I'm using a small Ics method at the moment, but we've got the XR feeders. They're slightly different. These are amazing when you're chucking at distance. They are like a bullet. So these are slightly different to an Ics method. These are sort of more compact. As you can see, it comes up, so it protects your actual bait that you're putting on the feeder. Different, you know, different sizes, different weights again, 20, 30, 45 grams. And then we've got the pellet feeder, which is, you know, one of them. Some people say to me, why do you use a pellet feeder? It's obviously a different approach. You know, the bait comes out of that feeder completely different to a method feeder. Obviously, really speaking, you're limited on that. It is about putting 2mm pellets in, or even some of the new 1mm. But we'll talk about that as we get going. But like I said, that's the Ics system. It's so easy. One rod, you can go between the 3 feeders, and then obviously you've got your different size feeders and different weights. You know, that will depend on the fishing style that you're doing. Normally for me, these sort of lakes, small Ics, small feeders are best, because you're in and out really often. If you go into a lake where you might not be getting so many bites, believe it or not, a bigger feeder is normally better when you're actually sat there and waiting a lot longer for your bites. So anyway, that's the feeder, that's the setup. Let's get out and we'll catch a few fish, and I'll talk you through how to load the feeder, and obviously what we're doing, you know, loading it, the different ways of loading it, and what's going through my mind when I'm fishing with the method. So I've just started fishing again now, and I'm going to run you through, obviously, a real big important thing is obviously using the mould and loading the feeder up correctly. We've always spoke about it, we've spoken about it for a lot of time, you know, a lot of years now, but there's little things that I do, and I probably don't know I'm doing them, and trying to pass this information on to you guys. Now, I have started catching really well. This morning when we started, I thought I'll try and catch some big fish, because there is some big carp in this lake. And I've just started using my 2mm. So I've got my little 2-pint container there. I was just bringing the 2 mils over, a little bit of bait booster, a little bit more water to get them actually to bind on the feeder. Did actually catch a few fish, but you could just sense at the moment with the sun out, you know, quite still day, I need to get other baits in to get the fish feeding. Started introducing some 1 mils into that. So that's where I am at the moment. I've got 1 mils and I've also got the 2 mils mixed together. So I'm going to load my feeder up. Because I'm catching well, what I've been doing is actually loading the Mould 3/4. I've got a little orange bandom on there. Stick that in the middle. And then just a little bit. But what you've got to remember, that hook bait is quite deep into the feeder. Obviously, I've put 3/4 of bait into the Mould first. And obviously press it in. Obviously, them little 1 mils now fit all the gaps in around the 2 mils. Plus, these fish nowadays love little particles. And that's why ground bait and obviously these 1 mils are going to be absolutely deadly, especially when the fish are in a bit of a funny mood. And then I'll get that in the palm of my hand. I'll give that a good squeeze, because obviously that's got to take the impact of actually, 1, getting it out there, and 2, going in the water. So I'll give that a nice squeeze like that. Ready to go. I got myself clipped up to the island. Give that a good cast out. And it goes, you can actually hear it go plop. And that tells me that bait is quite hard on the feeder. And at the moment, that is the way to load it to catch the fish. So get me line. Obviously, fishing quite a way out, really. Just get your line down like that as it's coming together. Sometimes if they're really having it, they'll actually take it before you get the line down. So that's gone down now. Get it on your butt rest, get it on your rest. Obviously I've got, like we spoke about before, the rod is facing towards where I'm fishing, because that just makes everything nice and easy to get the line down. Got my little stopwatch. Get that set up. I've got my Mould there. This is the time now to keep that pot there exactly as you need it for your method feeder. So I sort of hold that. Feels perfect. I can bind that in little balls, and I know that's going to be perfect to go around the method. And taking you back, like I said, I've got my 2 mils there are 2 dry, and I've got my ground bait there, which is 2 dry. And that's how I keep it. And I can bring that ingredients, same as the 1 mils, into my little pot there, and adjust it either with bait booster or just a few drops of water, just depending how I'm going. And believe you me, if you can get a little system like that, you will definitely 100% catch more fish. It will change throughout the day. You know, I remember earlier on when we were fishing, it went a little bit quiet. I had like 3 casts with neat ground bait around the feeder. I didn't actually catch a fish, but I had a few indications. I went straight back to the mix that I've got there, which is 1 in 2 mils, and straight away we caught again. So the ground bait definitely brought the fish back in, and I might have to do that again. I've only just started fishing. We've obviously been doing a bit of filming for the last half an hour, and that is another thing that you've got to be aware of, is using that stopwatch will allow you to learn lots and lots of things as you go along in your session. You know, does different hook baits work better? Loading the feeder different ways? You know, is ground bait better than pellets? You know, and most importantly to me is don't leave it out there too long, especially when you've had a run of fish. You know, you might have to cast out maybe 3 or 4 times quickly. You know, leave it out there for 2 or 3 minutes before you get a bite, and that might be the process you've got to do on the day. But without a stopwatch, that's really, really hard to understand. So I've got everything set. I've got, you know, I can use my hands, like I said, I can adjust my mix there. But at the moment, that feels absolutely perfect. And hopefully, you might have to cast that a couple of times to get the reaction of the fish again. I'm looking for little indications. There's a little liner then. So I know there's something around the feeder. It actually went like that, like 2 or 3 times then. Just hope that it goes right. Obviously, there's a few reeds out there. Normally, if I get a bite on the method, I just literally pick the rod up but I am fishing up against a couple of snags, so I've actually got to pull a little bit harder than normal to try and get them away from those snags. And the nice thing about venues such as Manor Farm, there's lots of different fish ages. There's some small F1s, great big F1s, some carp, and it's so nice to sort of, even if you come out, I've always said to people, come out and practice your method feeder fishing on a venue such as this. Get yourself on an island, you know, one rod, a few different baits, a few hook baits, and get into it, because it is, I love it. I absolutely love all method feeder fishing. I think it's absolutely great. There we go. So I had a couple of indications then, and that took, I'm looking at my stopwatch, 3 minutes 30, which I would say is probably sort of average, really. It's only a small F1 by the feel of that. Keep your rod nice and low, keep your tension on the rod. And with small F1s, if you can, if the conditions allow, try and get down to a 20 gram feeder, because it definitely helps get the smaller sort of F1s in carp out. But fishing that distance over there, you really need a 30 gram feeder. Small F1, probably a pound. Look at that, immaculate. Pristine fish. You see the bandum in him, little orange 6mm Scopex bandum. So let's go through that process again. Get your mould, 3/4 fillet. So that means that basically that hook bait is virtually right in the middle of that feeder. And if it was absolutely rigid in solid with fish, I'd probably just put the hook bait in first. So obviously that then with the hook bait would be near the top. But it's certainly not like that at the moment. Give that a good squeeze. Get yourself lined up. Nice little cast. Like that. It's the clip. Drop it down. And then I love my rod facing literally straight out into the lake. And that helps, one, to casting, I think, when you're casting to an island especially, or a feature. And that's, I can't actually, I thought that was a bite then. I couldn't actually tighten down onto the feeder, but I don't think it was in the end. I think it was me. A little bit nervous with the camera, I think. But I'm always looking for that. Sometimes you feel like a bite. Let's just go for that again. So 3/4 load it. Hook bait smack in the middle. Fill the mould, a little bit on the top. Thumb it down a little bit. Feeder on it. Nice big crush in. Get it in the palm of your hand. Nice squeeze like that. And a nice cast to the island. And when that goes down, the art of it is to hit the clip and try not to bring the feeder back as much. That's something you've got to practice. And then if you have the rod in front of you like me, it sinks the line so much quicker. And you can just bring the butt of the rod up. As long as them two lines are moving towards each other, that's as much as you want. Obviously the main thing is do not want to move that feeder at all. Just take your time. See several people sort of rush this and you think, did that actually move the feeder that time? It's really important you just take your time. And obviously today there's not a lot of wind. If there was a side wind, it'd probably actually help you sink the line that much quicker. So once that's met, on your butt rest, like that, a little tweak of the reel so the line from the end of the rod is basically going to where you're fishing. Little stopwatch. Get your mould. Basically you're getting ready for your next cast. Because obviously when you're catching lots of fish, all the little time you save here is time in the water. So I'm just looking for little indications. And it was so obvious this morning when we started. As soon as I put them smaller 1mm in, I mean I can put some ground bait in as well, But I thought the first option is to go to the 1 mils and just see what happens. But I might have to go to ground bait. But I'm just sticking with little bandems at the moment. Like that. Beautiful, that. So that's taken 40 seconds basically, which is awesome. Feels like a good F1. So keep your rod as low as possible. That's fighting back a bit, that one. Going for the rope. Try and be as smooth as possible. I think it's great fun method feeder fishing. I love it. And I used to come out and practice, and then people say to me, Des, your casting's absolutely brilliant. I used to just come out to a venue such as Manor Farm, just set up, pleasure fishing, 1 rod, get yourself clipped up. You don't have to fish right against the island, you know, as you start. And you just get more efficient, you get confident with your gear. Oh, that's that's one of those, what they call an F2, I think. It's like a fully scaled F1. Oh, look at him. Actually looks like a carp, but it is some sort of an F1. Oh, look at that. What a fish to catch on camera that is. It's actually like an F1, but a fully scaled carp. Absolutely beautiful, especially in that sun. So that was really, really quick that time. And like, if you look at me feeder there, it's still got some of the 2 mils and 1 mils mixed in. And obviously there probably been a lot more on that before I was actually playing that fish, and that's really, really important. I think a lot of people's, years ago, a lot of people used to get that and think, oh, that's not right, there's a bit of bait in me feeder. To now, I think nowadays it's dead right. So let's get another little 6 mil bandem. Just got changed to an orange one actually, that seems to be quite good at the moment. So I'm just going to go through the same process again. 3/4 fill the mould, bit over the top, and all you'll just put, if you put your thumb like that, because obviously taking people coaching, I do see them, they move the hook bait as they're messing around with their mould. So if you just put your thumb in there, like that, it just stops that from happening. Like that, look at that. With those 1 mils in that, like I said, it just fills all the little gaps in around the 2 mils. Obviously lots of little particles out there, which is what these fish want today. Give that a nice crush. And because nothing's like overly wet, you can make it bind. A nice cast again. And this is like what you've got to go out and practice, not just doing your, like this part here, is that casting. Because we all know it's important. You know, trying to cast to the same area and the same sort of distance. Let's get that down. These are absolute must. Little butt rests. Nice rod rest like that. Little stopwatch. And if that starts drying out, I can put a bit of bait booster on. Got my bait booster there, washed out, which is one of my favourites. And just put a little, literally, like a size of 50p piece. Mix that in. And it just keeps everything perfect. That's another nice fish as well, that. That actually swam towards me, that fish. I thought I'd missed that bite, but I haven't. 35 seconds. I love this style of fishing because you can adjust. It's like just fishing the pole. If you treat it like fishing the pole, you know, you might go, say you're, for instance, you're on a canal lake fishing for F1s in carp. You start on 2 mils, you get a little run of fish, and you think it's gone dead. Then you put ground bait in, and it's like a light switch. And that's exactly what you've got to do with the method feeder. It works the same process. But obviously with those 1 mil pellets now, it's even better. Another nice F1. Oh, it's come off in the net. Make sure that's not tangled around the rod. Let's go through that again. Didn't even have time that cast to actually fill me mould up ready, which is nice. So just remember that, a nice big squeeze. And that hits the clip down. You need that little bit of slack line. It's quite a fine art to get that when you're casting, but believe me, if you go out and practice it, it will come to you. So take your time, rod tip under the water, watch the 2 bits of line come together. Little tweak of the reel, and I mean a tweak, it's literally like move it an inch. And that helps it get down in the butt rest. Like that. I might not have to use a stopwatch as we keep going, but I do as much as possible, because you do learn. Things change during your match or your pleasure day. And you think, right, they've gone off. I've had a couple of casts now. I've left it 3 or 4 minutes. The big liner, that cast. Let's just mix them round with that bit of bait booster in it. So the nice thing about keeping all your ingredients a bit separate, like all my ground bait separate, I got my 2 mils, they're separate. If later in your session or your match, the big fish start feeding, I can then just go back to 2 mils, or I might better put a pellet. If I want to put a pellet feeder on for a different presentation, those dryish 2 mils are perfect for the pellet feeder. You don't want your 2 mil pellets wet for pellet feeder fishing, because you can cram them in with your thumb, and if you keep them quite dry for a pellet feeder, you watch them, they actually want to come out, which is what you want with a pellet feeder. So that's another sort of bonus by keeping your ingredients separate. There's another bite then, I've got to pull that a little bit. If they go to the left, I've got to watch them reeds. Great fishing. Don't think maggots are going to come into play today. It's going to be a bandom pellet day at the moment. Might have to put some ground bait in, or might have to change the ground bait if things change, but at the moment, it's come off at the net. Just check everything, make everything, check your hair. Just get a little system going. Nice squeeze, that's so important, that, is to squeeze it on. Because that impact of the water. And down. You do get a little bit of a bow. Obviously we've got a little tiny side wind on at the minute, but don't worry about that. Tweak of the reel. If you use 6 pound main line, it does shrink a little bit better, but the wear and tear factor obviously isn't like 8 pound. Just let that come together like that. Little tweak. I'm not worried about the tip being bent, even though my rod is virtually straight. As long as that line, which is going into the water from the tip, is facing towards where you're fishing, that is enough tension. It's so direct. Ooh. And at the moment, I'm not getting many indications. It's in there, I'm getting a real proper bite. But I also go to venues where you get lots of indications. They're really, really hard to get on the hook that's where you've got to be in and out all the time, because obviously they're coming to your feeder, they're really, really crafty, they're only picking up certain baits. That's when you've got to go from, like, you know, 4mm hard pellet, 6mm hard pellet, little robin reds. You know, I'll go to venues and a little robin red pellet is the best hook bait. No one knows why. There's a couple of indications then. And I'm looking for them indications, because obviously if I get a few indications and not a bite, I'll be back in and back out again. Because you've missed your little opportunity. And I might change in a minute. I'll double, what we call double loading the feeder. So what you do, you put the first layer on, you crush that on your feeder, and then you put another layer on with your hook bait in. So I know that basically my hook bait comes off with some, you know, the stuff you've not put on very hard, but the bit you put on first off is still around the feeder. And sometimes that can be deadly. Other days, you want everything sort of going to the bottom, melting off really quickly. They're in there, you get a bite. And that changes. That's what I love about it. It changes during the day. And you can mess about with how you load your feeder, how hard you put it on. And like this cast, I've had actually 2 or 3 little knocks. I'd love to have a camera there and see what they're doing, but that would spoil it, I think. It's all in your mind, method feeder fishing, what they're doing, you know, coming to the feeder. You know, obviously, if one comes up to your feeder, there's no doubt about it. If it spooks, you can just imagine all the bait that you've put around your feeder all wafting around. And I think that's probably why you've got to chuck back out again. It's like now, that's been out there for a minute or so, and you just think, really, I've had my last few bites at like 45, 40 seconds, something like that. You just think, I've got to cast back out again. So I'm just going to carry on for a minute, just keep loading that feeder the same, and then change if we need to, and I'll get back to you in a little while and let you know, obviously, if we've changed anything, we'll talk about that. Been fishing about half an hour since I last spoke to you, and at the moment I'm not putting the hook bait as deep into the feeder, and that seems to be sort of helping for some reason. And that's why, you know, I'm actually sort of putting the hook bait in there like that, sort of quite sort of on the top really. Just get the line out through that gap. So obviously it's a lot, it's not as deep into the frame of the feeder, and for these F1s at the moment, so I would say the hook bait now is there, but still crushing it on. And I seem to be getting bites quicker by doing that. Bit of a wind got up at the moment, which is quite nice for sinking the lines. It just keeps everything a little bit tighter and makes the line sink that much quicker. You need a good quality line. That sinking feeder mono is tough. It sinks really quickly. Little tweak on that. So I'm going to get me mould again. So a bit less in there. And that's what I adjust when I'm fishing away. I've just put a few more 1 mils in. You can just mix them around. Just get me mould ready. And then we talk about feeders itself. I mean, it's probably one of the biggest things in feeder fishing, commercial feeder fishing, is you know, why do you fish a pellet feeder? Why do you fish an XR feeder? And they all are slightly different. I mean, a pellet feeder like that, a lot of people love pellet feeders. They fish with pellet feeders all the time. They're really confident with it. Obviously, like I said at the start, the pellet feeder is about pellets. But the nice thing is with a pellet feeder as well, you can actually maybe put some 4 mil pellets in the back or in the front before you load it up with 2 mils at the front. So you can get some bigger. That was a lovely bite, that. And I think a pellet feeders, for me personally, is a fantastic feeder to start with. I've been to lots of festivals at White Acres, and I actually start on a pellet feeder because if you get them big crafty carp that probably feed at the start of a session or at the end, it only releases those pellets out at a very, very small area, which is obviously where your hook bait is. Obviously a method feeder is very, very different, which is what I'm using at the moment. I think this feeder is right at the moment. I'm creating a cloud, you know, the fish are having a go. I'm putting, you know, a bit more bait in, smaller particles. And then we got like the XR feeder. And for instance, you know, people say to me, why would you put, I said, love the F1 that. Why would you use an XR feeder? That is a different, again, it's a different presentation. It protects the bait that you're putting on the feeder. You know, literally, they have got to peck, which I'll just get this one off and show you what the XR feeder is all about. Oh, steady, steady, steady. Let's get him back. So the XR feeder, like I said earlier, which is like, got the walls on it. So when you put your bait in there, you know, you put your ground bait or your micros, whatever you decide to use, you put that in there, you put your hook bait in, again, the same principle as a method. You know, you can put your hook bait in deep, you can put it in high. That is like a little prison for your bait. You know, so they've actually got to come in there. If it changed today, so I was getting lots of indications and I've gone through the process of, you know, changing all my baits that I'm putting around the feeder. If that's not working, for me personally, that is when I start fishing with the XR feeder, because it is like, you know, they've literally got to put their heads on top of that feeder to get everything out. And obviously that will make a difference how hard you put it in, etc. But that's what them little feeders are all about. For me today, fishing with that, I know it's melting off. I can adjust how it's melting off by varying, you know, how hard I squeeze and all that. So that's the difference in between the feeders. They've all got their place, especially on different venues as well. You know, different venues, big carp, the pellet feeder can work amazingly. Where I personally think on a venue such as this, when there's lots of different fish, the method is amazing when they're feeding. It melts off. You can vary what you put on the feeder, how hard, and obviously different hook baits make a massive difference. But I'm just sticking with Bandoms at the moment because they're brilliant. So let's get a new Bandom on there, little 6 mils. I'm fishing with 6 mils today because of like the F1s that are in these lakes. Again, slightly less ground bait in at the start. So that bait is at the top. Nice squeeze. I mean, that wind's getting up a bit now. I'll give that a bit of a blast. And the line sinks so quick when you get that bit of side wind on it. But that's what you got when you got to go really careful how much pressure you put on that rod. You don't want to do anything to that feed. You want it to go down, settle, get your little stopwatch going. Little tweak of the reel. Awesome fishing. And I'm trying to keep it all simple at the moment. Just trying to stay with the same mix. Sort of 70%, I would say there's 70% 1 mils and 30% 2 mils at the moment. But earlier it did go really quiet and I had 3 casts with ground bait. Oh, look at that. That was a little knock then. Probably had the bait in its mouth and didn't quite hook that. And I'll leave that, I'll literally leave that for a few seconds. If it don't go, I'll be back in. If I'd have wanged down to that and the line would have stayed slack, obviously I would have picked up because it could have swam towards me. And what you got to remember as well with a method feeder, even though it's a small ICS, that you'd be surprised how much bait you go in, you know, how much bait you're putting on. It's very little in the big picture of things, but if you think of that to an XR, and that is the small version, admittedly. But so if you're getting lots of indications you can't catch, that's when those little XRs come into their own. I'm not going to leave that there now. That was a little indication. And I always put my rod like that, get me feeder under your butt cheek, keep a little bit of a bend in your rod. That stops anything getting tangled. And if you've got a little 2-point container like that, you can bring that over, jam it in between your legs, and you can work like that. Really, really efficiently, nice and quick. Put that back. I said, I'm ready to go now. I'm not going to have to untangle your tip or anything like that where the line's gone round. Get it in. And honestly, if you have your rod straight like me, like that, sinking the line is so quick and easy. Like that. Especially that little bit of side wind on as well. Now it's lovely. Again, little. So I've had the cast then. You know, I'm always thinking about, right, that was a little indication. I think I did have an F1 pick my hook bait up, but it just didn't quite hook itself. But not at the time being, I've just stuck with Bandoms, little pink ones, little orange ones going in between the two. There's a little indication then. I'm always looking for that because I think, oh, there we go. Oh, probably shouldn't have picked up on that, but there you go. We all miss a few bites. Again, under there, get your little container like that. And let's try it the other way around now, because that was 2 indications I've missed. I put a bit more bait in this time. And that's what I'm thinking all the time. Just varying it. So that's deeper in the feeder this time. Nice big squeeze. Beautiful fishing, I love it. And I said, if you're not great at casting, come to a venue like this with an island, clip up shorter. You know, if you're a bit worried about going into the hedges and stuff, or catching squirrels, just clip up a bit shorter, get yourself into it, and then work your way into the island when you're better at casting and you're more confident. And there's a few indications now, more indications than I've probably had all day. This is when it can get a bit tricky. I've been to venues where you get lots and lots of indications, and then you can like double load your feeder, you know, try and put as least bait round. That's when you can put like an XR on, because it's a different presentation. Or you could try a pellet feeder. And then pellets, going back to those dry 2 mils, which I've got in one tub, you definitely need your 2 mils a little bit on the dry side for a pellet feeder. So just remember that. That's the nice thing about keeping them 2 mils there on the dry side. If you do want to change to a pellet feeder, you can just put a couple of drops of water on there and they'll be perfect for the pellet or the pellet feeder. It definitely feels like I need to have a changeover. I've had 4 casts now, and I've had a bit of that, and I've not come back with a fish. And I think in my mind, I need to put the XR on, because that's what I would be thinking. So I'm going to wind in, change over, because it is a completely different presentation. And this is simple. It's taking that tail rubber off, smacking the stem out, put the XR on, same process, stem through it, let's put that tail rubber back on, and away. Obviously I've got the same sort of mould, like that. Just do it this side. And I'm going to put a little bit of bait in the mould first, put that in the middle. You've got to do this the other way round. You actually got to reverse it. But obviously when I show you now what that presentation's like, by the time I squeeze that down, that is completely protected. You can see that. But it's got vents in it that obviously push that bait out. So it is a lot different to the Ics method. Actually goes in different as well. When you cast that, it goes in more of a thud, because there's nothing at all coming off of it. Same process. It'd be really interesting now to see what happens. There we go. If you want proof of the pudding, that is what it's about. And that's why all these feeders such as that are designed for different circumstances like that. Unbelievable. So I've had 4 casts where I've had probably 4 or 5 indications. Change. It's probably time of day as well. Midday, just gone. We all know fish can go really funny. Incredible. Feels like a big F1 as well, that. Yeah, big fish. Look at that. See, it might just be them in your peg. I have been catching quite a few sort of pound fish, 12-ounce fish. And I did say at the start of this film, these big F1s are so crafty. We all know on the pole, even when there's quite a few of them in your peg, how crafty they are. Steady. Same hook bait, little orange bandem. Look at that, £3 F1. First cast within seconds. So if you want proof, you know, if you want proof why feeders are designed differently and why we all carry different feeders, that's exactly why. So let's do that again. So half fill the mould. Smack. It doesn't get easier with these moulds and that. And yet, like I said, look at that. It's got a little bit of a sort of concaved area, if you like. You can squeeze that in. There's clean the edges off, so you know that goes down. They're in like that. Different to the method. With the method, you can just imagine it all. You know, there's no doubt about it. It melts off. Your hook bait can be there. With this, you know that is in that feeder. You can hear it in the water. When it hits the water, it's like you've got a lead on. Nothing's being released. Same bait. Little indication then. Oh yeah, there we go. How long was that out there? 39 seconds. So second chuck on a different feeder. And I think that's something to do with the stamp of fish, because the last one I had was probably £3. This feels like a decent fish as well. You know, like, you know, that's why we carry different feeders with us. Things change. Like it did for me. 4 casts, when you get indications, I thought I'll just try a different feeder. This feeder is definitely not releasing the bait anything like the Ics method. Ooh, that actually feels like a carp. Not sure whether it is. If it is a small, decent one, smallish one anyway. Certainly fighting a bit different to the F1s. Not too sure. No, F1. Actually fighting like a carp, that. Another £2 F1. And I think that's probably what's happened. Them sort of pound ones, with the odd one of them, that's probably £1.50 actually. But beautiful Manor Farm F1. I'm going to have one more cast on this feeder. Again, with that mould, you can do it differently. You can have it deep. You can put your hook bait in shallow. Just check everything. Always check, make sure everything's dead right on that hair rig. Make sure it's hanging off correctly. You can even like put the hook bait in the top of that, crush it in. But you can tell the noise it makes when it goes in. Completely different noise to what I was fishing with earlier. You know it's not releasing the bait like the Ics method. It's protecting it. And when them fish get crafty like they did, this has obviously made a big difference. There you go, look. Unbelievable. That went in proper hard, that feeder. It's like boom. You know, nothing come off of it. Should I have put one on earlier? Not too sure, but that's fishing. Didn't have time to pick my stopwatch up that time. And this is going to be my last fish. I'm actually going to stay on because I'm enjoying it that much. But unfortunately for the film, that's going to be my last fish. Small F1 admittedly. Little orange bandam. Like I said, change over to that XR feeder. So there you go. I'm sure that you've learned lots of tips, and it's tips that I know you guys need. It's what I see on the bank sometimes. So if you take all those little tips that I've given you today about keeping your baits dry, your 2 mils, your ground bait and your 1 mils, or whatever baits you're using, keep them on the dry side. Have a little container like that, which is what I call like my little mixing bowl. Different hook baits, you know, get yourself a few different feeders for different occasions, and how your session or how your match will change. you can catch so many more fish. So there you go. I hope you've enjoyed the film, and hope to see you on the bank sometime. And thanks for watching episode 14 of Shipp's Tips.